too.
Yes, it does.
This was my Christmas gift to myself. But we're going to talk a little bit about the attack on Christmas. And there is an attack on Christmas because Christmas means a lot to this country and means a lot to our foundations. And in recent years, secular groups have been advocating the complete separation of church and state and have been circulating misinformation about legalities of public celebrations of Christmas, seeking to confine Christmas to the church or home. And as a result, many of public officials have been misled into believing that Christ must be removed from Christmas in public venues. That is not what the Constitution says. And despite these new assaults on Christmas, the Constitution does not require public officials to entirely obliterate religious themes or displays from public Christmas observations. A lot of them do, and they're removing them all across the country. And in fact, no court has ever ruled that the Constitution prohibits Christmas carols. No court's ever ruled that the Constitution prohibits Christmas displays or Christmas greetings in public streets, parks, schools, or commercial establishments, as long as the religious items are included along with secular symbols of the holiday season. That's constitutional. Public decorations often depict only non-religious symbols of a winter holiday, such as snowmen and reindeer. Schools and public areas are eliminating any religious music. We saw they're taking religious words out of the music. Many businesses have even banned the greeting Merry Christmas. Is this what the Supreme Court meant? None of these measures are legally required by the Establishment Clause. And when I say Establishment Clause, that is it's against the establishment of religion in the First Amendment of the Constitution, despite what secular legal organizations hostile to public recognition of Christianity would have us believe. Now, here we talked about earlier the Liberty Council's naughty or nice list. Get on the website. They list the organizations that support Christmas, the retailers that don't support Christmas. And I would suggest that we boycott these stores that profit from Christmas but refuse to acknowledge it. Let's stand up from Christmas because we can make an impact. This is a Christian nation. There's a lot of Christians here. I'm not getting down on any other type of religion, but check it out, Naughty and Nice. What's cool is they have buttons, they have things that really support Christmas here. Or if you know of a business that's getting harassed by supporting Christmas, if you contact them, they provide free legal rights to go in and free legal work to go in and challenge it. So a great website, again, at lc.org. But the attack on Christmas, getting back to this, as long as you're including a religious component along with secular symbols in public holiday displays and concerts, this does not violate the separation of church and state. I mean, if you have a Christmas concert and you have a Christmas song and you have a secular song in there, you can say Jesus Christ 100 times in that song, and it doesn't violate the Constitution. As long as there's a mix of secular and religious in the program, you can do Christmas songs and mention Jesus Christ. You can have symbols regarding Jesus Christ as long as you have secular symbols also. The separation of church and state, and this is important, going back to the graphic, a doctrine, this is often cited by the ACLU, by separatists, as part of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment. But in fact, the Supreme Court has stated that the Establishment Clause requires neutrality, not censorship. With respect to private holiday displays, nativity scenes may not be banned while other seasonal decorations are permitted. The Establishment Clause was never meant to censor religion, but that's how it's being used today by people, and that's not what the purpose of it was. Let's look at this basic law on display of nativity scenes or religious symbols on public property. This has been dealt with a lot by the courts. The display of nativity scenes and religious symbols takes on two forms. You can have publicly sponsored and privately sponsored, both of which can be displayed on public property. A publicly sponsored scene is one that's erected and maintained by public officials. A privately sponsored scene is one that's erected and maintained by private citizens. Both are constitutional, and both can be displayed on public property. The main difference is that a publicly sponsored scene should have some form of secular display in the same context, what we talked about, while a privately sponsored scene doesn't have to have any secular symbols at all. as long as it's privately sponsored, but should probably have a sign indicating that the display is privately sponsored. So if you have a privately sponsored display at a park on public property, it's not required to have secular symbols with it, but again, you should have a sign indicating that it is privately sponsored. Let's look at some examples of public-sponsored Christmas holiday displays that are perfectly legal under the Establishment Clause. For example, a holiday display can include a nativity scene along with Santa Claus. Maybe Santa Claus will get saved, you never know. Reindeer, Rudolph.
Oh, St. Nick now.
Yeah,
Give
St.
him a break. Santa Claus was a saint.
He
right?
was. St. Nicholas, reindeer, Rudolph needs Jesus too. Or a Christmas tree. As long as you've got both of those, it's fine. What's true for a public-sponsored holiday displays, this is important on public property, is also true for holiday displays in public schools. A teacher can decorate the classroom with or feature a display having both religious and secular symbols of the holiday, and it's perfectly legal under the Establishment Clause. They can have a nativity scene in the classroom and still would be perfectly legal under the Establishment Clause as long as they would have other displays there of secular items. Now let's look at privately sponsored religious displays on public property. A privately sponsored religious symbol can also be displayed on public property. The main difference is that the display is sponsored by private citizens. Privately sponsored scenes are more common in public parks where citizens are allowed to engage in expressive activity. In most public parks, citizens are allowed to hold gatherings or erect displays, have Bible studies, have church meetings to prohibit religious expression in a public forum where other expressive activity is permitted. That violates the Constitution. Don't forget in the Establishment Clause, it doesn't just say that you can't make a law that prohibits the establishment or promotes the establishment of religion, but also one that prohibits the free exercise thereof. Don't ever forget that really it mandates neutrality, and it's been used today as censorship. And the First Amendment of the United States Constitution was never meant to censor God out of the schools, to censor God out of City Hall, to censor God out of the public parks. As Jill said, I guess on the one, they don't want Jesus in the public parks anymore. And we need to fight, to take back Christmas. Now is not the time to lay down our spiritual arms and surrender to the very small percentage of Americans who are hostile towards Christianity. And I've got this on a graphic here, that now is the time to fight back regarding Christmas. We can start with maybe boycotting these businesses that don't support Christmas. And it's time to not lay down our spiritual arms and surrender to the very small percentage of Americans who are hostile towards Christianity, including Christmas, from our national life. Let us not only with confidence keep Christ in Christmas, but using this season as an opportunity to proclaim Him as the Savior.
Correction, real quick.
Okay.
National parks, the U.S. national parks.
So it wasn't the state ones.
No, 500,000 Christmas trees throughout our various national parks around the country can no longer carry Jesus ornaments.
Really?
Nothing with Jesus involved, no.
See, and that should be challenged, because if
But
they
it
have
happened
any...
with everything else going on in Washington, no one noticed. It was a group that started in Phoenix, and before we knew it, it snowballed to D.C. Next.
See, and people don't understand...
How are you going to fight that when
Right.
you only hear about it once on the news?
And what has happened is people have used separation of church and state as a buzzword, and they think that any time that God is represented in a public forum that they can't do it. And just like in that situation, it's
just ridiculous.
I mean, the government might start praying to Rudolph, but I think I'd rather pray to Jesus or pray to God in that situation.
I just wanted to correct that.
But again, and we in this